it's Bob at Biking Friday. This is the first video of several I'm going to do of a recent tour I did, riding my Bike Friday. This is the first tour that I've done completely self-supported. You can see the bike there with the trailer in tow. But this was a ride I flew into the Chicago metro area. I rode up out of the Chicago metro area into Wisconsin, across into Milwaukee, where I took the high-speed Lake Express ferry across to the Michigan side and then rode down. The tour took me about a week, and this will be day one, riding up out of Chicago. So like I said, I had to fly into Chicago. I don't live there anymore. It's where I'm from, but I currently live in Arizona. So I had to fly into Chicago, and you can see there that piece of checked luggage, that Samsonite suitcase, is actually my bike, weighing in just under 50 pounds, so I didn't have to pay any extra fees, but otherwise it just flies as checked baggage, and that's the purpose of my having purchased this bike. And that suitcase, again, is used once you get to your destination. It converts it into a trailer, so you can carry your gear there. So there's my suitcase, the Samsonite with the bike inside of it. It's not a quick fold and pack away. If you're looking for something, the bike doesn't just, it's not like you just pull a switch and the thing folds and you put it inside the suitcase. There is some degree of taking it apart and then putting it back together once you get to your destination. So you have to be somewhat handy with the mechanicals of your bike, but otherwise it saves a lot of money, and it allows you to travel without having to pay extra fees for your bicycle. So there's the bike put together. And I had a lot of people ask me about how I completed such a long tour on a bicycle such as that with such small wheels. And if you've done any research on these bikes at all, you'll see people have ridden extensively, toured extensively on these bikes. The small wheels, you feel the ground a little bit different. The steering feels a little bit sharper, but otherwise it rides very similar to my full-size bike. The geometry of it is actually built to the similar specs as my full-size bike. So when I'm riding along, it feels very similar to the other bikes that I ride. And there's the suitcase packed with my gear. My total weight on this trip, everything excluding me, was about 100 pounds. And that's the bike, the suitcase, all my gear. And as I've read others have experienced, I had more weight and more stuff than I really needed, but live and learn. And there is the actual route the first day, that was day one, the route I took. It left out of the town of Glen Ellen, which is a western suburb of Chicago, and got on the Prairie Path up to where it junctioned with the Fox River Trail, and took that up to where it junctioned with the Grand Prairie Trail. And it got me to just shy of the Wisconsin border. And my intention was for the first day to push about 80 miles. I had intended, considering it was mid-September when I did the trip, I had intended to push about 80 miles first day. And by chance, and I was intending to just show up at the motel or the hotel where I intended to stay, figuring it was small town and they would have vacancy. But luckily, I called a week or two prior to my tour and found out that there was no vacancy for any hotels anywhere near where I was going to be, or where I intended to get to, because of weddings. So I had to find fortunately, I found a hotel. It was just about 55 miles from where I was intending to start, in the town of Richmond. And that was fortuitous, considering it was hotter than I expected. And that first day, I was pretty well beat at 55 miles, and 55 miles ended up being the longest day of this tour. Had I pushed on to do 80, which under normal circumstances with an unloaded bike, 80 miles is not a problem, but had I pushed 80 miles that day, it would have been a problem. So I'm glad it worked out. And here's the bike, morning of my departure. That's leaving Glen Ellen. That's the Glen Ellen fire station right there in the upper left-hand corner.
And so it begins.
day one. Here is, the sun was just starting to come up as I was pushing through, and this is, I don't know if this is Glen Ellen, or once I passed into the town of Wheaton. But either way, these quaint neighborhoods, side streets. It was Saturday morning early. Traffic was almost non-existent, so it was a nice morning. It was relatively cool to start the day, but not so much that I needed a jacket or anything, so it was actually perfect. And then once I got into downtown Wheaton, which is where I met up with the Prairie Path runs parallel to the Burlington Northern Metra train tracks there through town. But I stopped at a Starbucks, had myself some coffee, and took care of some other logistics I needed to take care of before I got on my trip properly. And then the Prairie Path follows along. The train tracks are just to the right of where this picture is showing, and it gets to where the Prairie Path actually branches off into two separate directions. You can go southwest to Aurora or northwest to Elgin, which is where I was intending to go. And then as you come up, and here's where the juncture is, so I'm looking right from where I'm standing and towards the Elgin branch, and towards that bridge that took me over the train tracks, and you got a little view of downtown Wheaton. So if you've ridden the Prairie Path, it's a rail trail, so it's flat. There's not a lot of elevation, other than when you're crossing. There are a few bridges to go over streams and/or major roadways, but it's a crushed limestone for the most of the Prairie Path. At least this part of the Prairie Path is crushed limestone, and a lot of tree growth over, so there's shade. The roads that you crossed, any major roadways, had traffic control devices. You were either crossing with the stoplight with other traffic, or if you're crossing in a smaller or a more residential area, they were marked, such as what you see here. Some more pictures of the Prairie Path and what you're going to see. Then eventually you get to some areas where the path is actually paved, which is nice. And the bike I was riding with the wheels, I had about 1.5 size, the main wheels on the bike, and then the trailer wheels. But even on any of the crushed rock throughout any of this trip, I had no issues whatsoever with rolling resistance or anything like that. And here you see where the Prairie Path meets up with the Fox River Trail. And of course, I followed the Fox River Trail north towards Wisconsin. And you can see it was mostly paved, following up into the city of Elgin. And you can see the path itself parallels along with the Fox River. So the sights were I'll say, nice. Through Elgin. And then after passing through Elgin, came to the towns of Dundee, Algonquin, the north suburbs, along the Fox River Trail. And these are some of the sights that I saw, and this was just about the time when I was starting to get hungry. So, and I had intended to stop at this Duke's Barbecue, but as it turned out, I was when I was passing through there, it was earlier than they opened. So I ended up diverting just across the path and just maybe a block or so up to this place, DC Cobb's Burgers and Brews, where it fit the bill. And I filled my belly, refilled my water bottles, and there's some pictures of the restaurant and some of the views I had sitting at the restaurant.
Rolling through East Dundee, just had lunch.
Then continued my way northward. And the path, you can see it really is well maintained. A lot of it is paved, and this is some of what I saw along the way. And for some reason my videos don't want to play on this in the keynote that I'm showing. But you can see passing up through Algonquin, and there's a photo of Algonquin as I was passing through.
Cruising through Crystal Lake.
Then I pushed on northward out of the metro area, and the path you see to the right there with the yellow dividing line, that's actually the bike path, so that's not for motorized traffic. That's just the bike path that I was on. And that day, it was Saturday, it was warm, pushing close to 90 degrees. There were quite a few people on the path that day, but not to the point of being crowded. But eventually I got to some wooded areas, and more wooded areas. And the sign in the upper right-hand part of the screen there, and I don't think this video is going to play, but it says dismount, bike, and walk. And I've been riding for a long time. Those signs generally, I knew it wasn't going to be so steep that I needed to dismount, even pulling the weight that I was. But lesson learned, I should have known better. If that video would play, it would show that it goes down a bit of a grade, and you get to the bottom of that little dip, and then you have to go back up. And the up is not prohibitively steep, but it was definitely, I was filming, which was I should have known better. But I got to where I should have shifted, and I didn't, and so the result was predictable. So pay attention to the signs, and my computer was showing towards the top of that grade going back up. It was 17%, so it was significant, but it really didn't slow me down much. But pay attention to the signs. And then eventually the path transitioned into the Grand Illinois Trail. I thought it was the Prairie Trail, but I'm not sure. But Grand Illinois Trail, either way, it continues north. It basically just it's a continuation of the Fox River Trail going north towards the Wisconsin border. And there's just some photos of the ride. And then what you're seeing here on the left-hand photo and the upper right photo, the bike path is actually the part with the yellow divided line. That's where the bikes go, and the pavement to the right, those are actual roads for vehicles, motorized vehicles. So it's nice. You're completely separated from it and passing through a lot of different farmland.
All right, in the town of Ringwood. Not too far from where we're going to end. Looks like we may be running out of paved trail. So we'll see how this ends.
And then the pavement ended. It went back to crushed limestone type trail, which again, the rolling resistance was fine. It really didn't slow me down. It wasn't a problem. I got my trailer a little dirty, the wheels not that dirty, but other than that, it didn't create a problem at all. Passing through the town of Ringwood, and eventually getting close to Richmond, which that left photo there is the town of Richmond, and stopped at the Dog and Suds, got myself some food, and where the Dog and Suds was right off of a pretty busy highway, and that highway is, and especially it being a weekend, leads to, there's several lakes in southern Wisconsin that are pretty busy places. There's Twin Lakes, Wisconsin, there's Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, and this would be a thoroughfare for a lot of people getting to and from there. So the only issue I had that first day with traffic would have been getting across that highway. And the reason I had to get across is that that arrow is pointing to the hotel where I was staying, and that is literally just a few blocks south of the Wisconsin border, but it took me just a little bit to get across because traffic was really heavy and there wasn't any traffic control devices, at least in the area where I was. I could have, of course, gone back down into town and crossed that way, but then I would have had ridden with that traffic all that distance just to get up to where I needed to go. So that was the only issue I ran across. And here is that same highway looking back the other way. So you can see traffic was fairly heavy that day, and it really wasn't giving me a break. But eventually I did, and I got across and made it to the first day's hotel. So yeah, first day, 55 miles completed. Elevation gain 869 total over the course of those 55 miles. Average speed for the day was 11.0. High temperature, pushing 87 degrees. Low humidity relatively to that area of the country. So it was hot, and it took a little bit out of me, but the humidity was somewhat cooperative, so it wasn't as bad as it could have been. And of course, beginning of the day, low temperature being 68 degrees, which made for a really nice start.